Hello and welcome. My name is Nate from Video Games Recon, and in this video we're going to discuss the good, the bad and the ugly of the Exo Zombies map Infection, otherwise known as Burger Town. First off, and as usual, this is just my humble opinion, so please try not to lose your shit should you happen to disagree. Now, I initially thought I'd be doing a weapon montage video with some discussion towards the end like in my previous Exo Zombies video, but due to the lack of guns, which is something we'll cover later, that idea was rendered mute. So instead, I thought I'd do a top 5 good things about this map and a top 5 bad things. Again, that idea was rendered mute when I realised I couldn't think of 5 good things, and the things I could think of were stretching the term good a little. So instead I'm going to cover my top 5 worst things about this map, then discuss some essentially backhanded compliments, then summarise my overall thoughts on this map. Now before we get into it, I don't want people to think I'm jumping on the hate train and just straight up bashing this map purely for the sake of it. I'd just like to add there is a lot of fun to be had here, and overall it's not that bad. It's not that good either, but it's not that bad. So with that, let's get into my top 5 bad or downright ugly things in the Exo Zombies map Infection.
Number 5.
The whole map seems to be geared towards periodically forcing you to fight your rounds down in the cramped sewer area. In particular during the infection and toxic rounds, as entire areas get shut off due to being contaminated, which seems a little counterproductive in terms of making your average sized map and player areas even smaller, and in the case of the infected rounds, forcing you to stay near the decontamination area. Now, having something to get you to play in different areas of a map instead of just endlessly running a train in one spot over and over again isn't a bad idea, but shutting off parts of the map and forcing you into an area which just isn't able to accommodate 4 players at once is nonsensical at best. And this leads me on to
Number 4 in this list.
As just like previously discussed, there comes a point in your progression into the higher rounds, about 29 or 30, where a multiple toxic contamination round kicks off, making at least 2, possibly more areas off limits, whilst being combined with the Goliath boss zombie, forcing you either into the sewers, perhaps to get decontaminated, or forcing all players into one train area, which with a Goliath zombie makes for a very steep learning curve in terms of difficulty, and pretty much nowhere to run, as up to this point there are difficult moments but everything is pretty manageable. But then once you reach this arbitrary point, the difficulty level scales exponentially, especially if you're playing co-op, as things get way too cramped for 4 people to fight the Horde and a Goliath, meaning that round 30 will be an arbitrary line in the sand that many players will just not be able to cross.
Number 3.
The one and only new weapon in this game that is supposed to be some sort of special or wonder weapon is completely underwhelming. Sure, it looks cool and works sort of like if the Paralyzer had a baby with the wave gun, but unlike those 2 weapons, the Magnetron gets weak fast. As after about round 10, and including an upgrade here and there, this thing already feels weak and unimpressive, even next to the Cell 3 Cauterizer, which can be acquired by all players at once, and unless I'm mistaken, only 1 player at a time can have the Magnetron. And on top of this, unlike the EM1 directed energy weapon, the Magnetron has a cooldown, so as not to overheat. These things combined make this weapon a major disappointment.
Number 2.
The civilian extraction rounds are near pointless after the first couple of times, as they are incredibly difficult to do, often in very unforgiving areas, offer pretty minimal rewards especially in the later rounds, and the survivor's AI is, to put it kindly, very simple, and to be blunt, straight up retarded. And if you decide to complete the Easter egg and max out your weapon's upgrade path, then there is no reward whatsoever for completing these missions. Sure, there is a penalty for not completing the civilian extraction, but getting the power turned off is much easier to deal with than to rescue those stupid survivors who quite frankly deserve what they get. that right there is a perfect case of natural selection.
Number 1.
And the absolute worst sin on this map is the lack of new weapons, perks and drops. That right here makes this map seem like a lazy addition to Exo Zombies. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they put a lot of work into this map, but to the average consumer that sees these standard things in a Treyarch Zombies map, end up making this whole experience feel cheap and a little bit copy and paste from Outbreak. For example, if you think of any Black Ops 2 map, no two feel the same, excluding the closed off segments in transit. Without new perks, weapons and drops to refresh the game and add extra character to a map, it just feels like a direct extension of the last map, and by that logic, it leaves you thinking what's the point in having this map when it's near identical to the last. I was thinking to myself when making my Outbreak weapons montage video that they'd shot themselves in the foot, pun intended, as there weren't many weapons left from Advanced Warfare that they could put into the next 3 map packs, and clearly that was a founded concern. For me, I think they should just bite the bullet and think of a way to implement old Call of Duty weapons into the fold. Perhaps by finding old 3D printer files lying around the place. Just a thought there, Sledgehammer. But seriously, they're going to have to think up something for future maps, or Exo Zombies is going to end up a damp squib. Now on to what I'm dubbing backhanded compliments, as calling some of these things pros or advancements is stretching the truth a little. First up, all the things that made Outbreak enjoyable and interesting are still the case here on the Infection map, and in particular having different zombie types. And with that, there are a couple of new zombie types, the Acid Rippers and the Spiked Zombies, to contend with. However, that said, these new zombies have very minimal impact on the game. The Acid Rippers do mix up the gameplay a little, as with all the acid lying around on the ground, it can be harder to heal after getting hit, as each time you run into the acid, you have to wait again to fully heal. But the Spiked Zombies make pretty much no impact on the game. Sure, they shoot out spikes every so often, but the damage is minimal, and to be honest, you barely even notice their existence. And on top of this, looking forward, I hope they find a way to remove the EMP zombies without making the exosuits too OP, as I think we can all agree they're annoying as hell. So, a mixed bag there. Next we have the map itself. Now, I've heard a lot of people bashing on this map, saying the layout is terrible and it has an unimaginative art style, and to a degree they have a point. But personally, I think this map itself is decent. Sure, it's not as imaginative as most Treyarch maps, but that's because they're trying to do something different. Sure, that might not make it as good an experience as Treyarch Zombies, but if they'd have changed nothing, they'd be getting slammed for straight up copying Treyarch. So they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. So as for the layout, I quite like it. In some areas it's a bit too open, and in other areas like the sewer it's a bit too cramped. But in general, I quite liked the layout. It made for a challenge without being too difficult. That said, once you take the toxic and contamination rounds into play that essentially cut off areas and funnel you towards the sewers, we have a bit of a problem. But overall, I don't think this map's layout is nowhere near as bad as some people are making out. Then there's the traps, which I found quite diverse and interesting, ranging from the outright wacky in the Instigator, see what they did there, to the more mundane automated snipers and distraction traps and so on. I found these traps much more interesting and useful than the traps in Treyarch Zombies, aside from when going for high round challenges of course. But when that's the only thing outperforming Treyarch Zombies, that isn't saying a huge amount. And finally there's the Goliath boss rounds, which is a fun little addition to this map and does add some excitement to a round. And having projectiles shoot at you definitely adds some novelty to the gameplay. And this thing does look hella cool in my opinion. But aside from this, it relies on that old EMP chestnut way too much. And its other attacks and abilities are a little uninspired. But overall, having a boss round is definitely a good addition to Exo Zombies. Well, would you look at that, there are a couple of good additions to this game mode. Who would have thought? So, let's summarise a little, shall we? Like I said before, there is plenty of fun to be had here, and I think some people are overreacting, saying things like this is the worst map ever and so on. Overall, it's a decent, if a little underwhelming map, but my biggest problems with the Infection map is the linear art style progression from Outbreak to Infection and the lack of any new guns, perks and drops to add a bit of diversity to the gameplay and feel of the map, all in all making a very minimal distinction between the two maps. So it just ends up feeling like Outbreak in a new area. So would I suggest you picking up this map? Well, if you don't have the Season Pass and are a massive Zombies fan, then sure, pick it up. I'm sure you'll get something out of it. But if you're a casual zombie fan or have a very finite budget, then this is probably one to give a miss, as there isn't too much different here from the original Exo Zombies map. So, that's my humble opinion on the Exo Zombies map Infection. This just leaves me with my usual rigmarole, in that if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe for more BS of a similar nature. Thank you and goodbye.